Good morning, it's Shanna. This week I have 3 books sent to me by Llewellyn for review that I wanted to go over. And the first one is The Witch's Runes by Tremaine. This one, this is a editor's copy, if I remember. I don't know if that's the correct term. So this is not how the back will look. And this line here won't be on the copy that you would receive. On sale January 26, 2026. This one I have read all the way through. Of the 3 that I bought, of the 3 that were sent to me, this is the only one I read all the way through. It did not take me very long. It's only just under 200 pages. This one caught my eye because, as you know, I work with runes in my practice, and the Witch's Runes have always been intriguing to me. I think they are an interesting concept, and I really didn't know that much about them. Even online, there's just not that much information about them, so I was intrigued when I saw the title of this book, and very excited to have it sent to me to dig into. So as we get into it, each of the chapters is based on the rune itself. Now, I don't recall whether or not they said that any internal changes would be made. I feel like if I recall that it's just editing that hasn't been completed in these. So there may be some changes to the layout, but I'm not sure on that. I'm not entirely sure on that. Regardless, the contents is laid out by each of the runes, and then the beginning, I really didn't flag too much in this book to come back to. It talks about where the runes originated. It talks about kind of the concept behind them, and I'm trying to remember how this was laid out. It's been a few days, really a couple weeks since I read this. It says it first appeared in the writings of psychic and occultist Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki. She was born in 1929, which is so weird that pretty soon we're going to start having to make that distinction between 19 and 2000, right? So it goes into a little bit about her, where she comes from, her background, and how the witches' runes originally started as the Stones of Lear. And then it goes into, it says the interest expands. It talks about over the years. We get into 1975 with Dana Corby. She was a priestess of the Mohesian tradition of Wicca and one of the founders of the Covenant of the Goddess. And she also published an article in the neo-pagan journal Crystal Well about a set of similar stones. Corby's rune set had 14 runes, while Ashcroft Nowicki's had 10. So it's just, it's evolved a little bit since this original rendition of the runes. And then we get into the 80s, where we have Patricia Crowther. 1989 with Scott Cunningham, Rhiannon Ryle. In 1998, we get into Susan Shepard. Again, these are all just people who have been prominent voices for the Witches' Runes or have been notably users of the runes. And then in 2022, we have Judy Ann Knock. In 2024, we move on to Jennifer Heather, connecting with the Witches' Stones. And then the evolution of the stones themselves. And it talks about the distinctions between each of these people and how they used them and where these stories evolved from for them. And then it talks about performing a reading with the Witches' Runes, which is pretty straightforward. It's not anything that, if you've been into tarot for a while or the Elder Futhok runes, if you've been into those at all for a while, this is all pretty much the same concept. It's not new. However, if you're new to runes and or divination in general, this would be helpful because it talks about formulating your question, preparing the runes, waking the runes, shaking casting, interpreting the layout, and reflecting the message. And then it moves straight into each of the runes individually. So now each of them has keywords. It shows the symbol. And the set that I have, I'm going to use my nail file here as a bookmark. The set that I have is a metal set. I had previously made a set on stones, but I just like these. They're nice. You can buy these pretty much anywhere. I believe this was a Kickstarter from Mystic Metals. So again, I think there's 13 or 12, if I remember right with what I just said, depending on the set. And most of the time they'll come with a blank one. You'll get a yes and a no. So those are that's the basic concept. So yeah, you get into the keyword, what it represents, what interprets, what it means when it's interpreted in specific ways. So we have the sun rune, the moon, the rings, the birds, the waves, the crossed spear, the wheat, the sickle, the star. And then it goes into how to select your runes if you're making them for yourself. So if you wanted to make them out of resin or stone or metal or whatever the medium is that you want yours to be made of, it talks about selecting. Specifically, if you're going to be picking a stone, using sea stones versus earth, and then depending on where you pick up the runes, the different symbolisms that each of them can hold, and then store-bought, choosing by shape and size, marking them, taking your time, and then it goes into the consecration of your stones, so materials that you need, and then the directions. I will say that while, again, if you're brand new to divination or runes in general, I think this could all be very helpful. I don't think that there's anything in here revelatory or necessarily, other than maybe the history of the runes, because I'd never heard any of the history of them, so I thought that was interesting. But other than that, it's nothing in here that you couldn't just find online, which, having a book has its own benefits, right? Like you can highlight and make notes, refer back to, you don't have to save a certain website. So having the book is helpful. But if you've been around the block a few times with divination, this is probably not any new information. And then it goes a little bit into the specific stones, and it goes into inner reading, in culture and mythology. It talks about the different types of eyes, for that specific rune. And it goes into the mythology about it, making your own eye stone. And then there's a meditation. Each one will also go into a meditation that you can use and perform. So this is another plus in that, you don't have to be online or on your phone in order to access these particular meditations. So I thought that was really nice. For me, reading a meditation is difficult, so it would be something that I would either have to study/memorize in order to, do again, or record as a voice memo and then play it back. So you do get a little bit longer explanation, culture, and mythology for each of the runes. My goodness, I have this lint. It does not want to let go. And then you move into placement in the reading. Okay, so then we have reading the runes, reading with the eye as querent, there's a little incantation, so it tells you where to place the eye, still your mind, recite the chant, blow air onto the stones, cast them, discarding any stones lying face down. That's just one of the methods that's mentioned. And then reading the remaining stones in a spiral, starting at the stone closest to the eye stone. So, and then you have your leading stone. When you read with the 9-stone method, you'll usually have a leading stone, a stone that falls closest to the eye. There's usually only one of these. So then it goes into, depending on what that eye stone is closest to, whether it's the sun or the moon or the rings, that's what this particular reading would mean or indicate. So then it goes into reading with the 10-stone, points to remember. It talks about including or not including stones that are face down, stacked stones, certain combinations. So that was kind of interesting how I think in a lot of ways this was similar to Lenormand. When you get certain specific cards that are paired or next to each other, it can mean a certain thing. It talks about casting frivolously or not, as the case may be. Talking about who should handle your runes, sample readings, and then it talks about the layout and different, combinations of that. It gives a few question examples. I feel like there was one other. Okay, so then it was just the conclusion. And if I remember right, there are a couple blank pages that you could use for notes. Whether or not that was intended, I don't know. But I would say overall, I think it's good if you're interested in runes and you want to dig into them a little bit. I just think part of the issue for me is that there's such a new concept that there's just not that much new information or, I guess, theory on them. So overall, it was a fun read. Is this a book I would hold on to? Probably not. Like I said, there wasn't that much information in there that I felt was necessary to hold on to a whole book for myself personally. I don't think that it was particularly groundbreaking in the writing style. Like, it was fine. It was straightforward. It was easy to read. Like I said, it just took me a couple of days. But it was a fun book. If you're into the witches' runes and you want to learn a little bit of the lore and where they originated. And I think the section on the readings was exceptionally helpful just to get an idea of how you could interpret these specific readings. So that is The Witch's Runes by Tremaine. Josephine Winter. Forward by. So I guess there is 2 authors. I apologize. Josephine Winter and Jason Tremaine. All right, next is Tarot by Tempest, and then I have just this, little insert that was included with the book. Again, this won't be here. This is due out February of 2026, and then, again, the back will look different than this. It'll be a finished back. So this one piqued my interest because Laura Tempest Zakroff has a couple oracle decks. I don't think she's got a tarot deck, to my knowledge anyway. And I have always been, math and numbers are not my strong suit. It's just not something I'm drawn to. It's not something I'm particularly good at. And so I thought bringing numbers in with tarot, because I've been really interested in the numerology side of tarot, I thought this would be a fun addition to the books that I can, reference as I'm using tarot. And I thought the cover was pretty. If we're being honest, I thought it was a really cool cover. So this one gets into playing with numbers, meaning, and movement. I have not finished this book, but I wanted to give my sort of, preliminary thoughts on it. So in the contents, we talk about meeting the tarot, a quick look at the big 3, choosing a tarot deck, getting acquainted. So this is very much, beginner tarot things, in my opinion. I don't think someone who's been around tarot for an extended period of time would necessarily gain a lot of knowledge, but it is fun to see how other people approach learning tarot. So, and then we get into the magic of numbers, meaning and movement, rethinking our feelings about math, art, and movement, shapes and symbols, colors, composition, meaning in the movement. And then chapter 3 is the major arcana from 0 to 10. And we move through each of the majors. And then we get into chapter 4 is the major arcana from 11 to 21, 11 to 21. And then we move into the minor arcana and we go through the aces from aces to tens. So we, our structure is each of the 4 aces, the 4 twos, the 4 threes, etc. Moving all the way up through the tens, and then we get into the court cards, courting the numbers, age and gender expression, holding all the cards, breath by 3, full body 3 breaths, tarot, ruffle, shuffle. Then we move into tarot spreads, mapping the meaning. What is a tarot spread? Doing the math, assessing spreads, and adding up meaning. So as you can see, it goes really in depth, and then it moves into the different spreads that you can use. I have not done any of these spreads, but I find that an interesting addition to the book and something that I can definitely reference back. And then it talks about thinking outside the spread, more tarot number ideas, divination for the year, a winter solstice ritual, which I'm tempted to do that this year. The solstice is just a few days away from now. So that might be something that I do. And then it talks about what's the best way to phrase my question? Is it okay to do a daily reading? I really feel like this is another book for beginners or someone who maybe hasn't dived very deeply into tarot. Maybe you have solely used your guidebooks, the little white books, and you want something to kind of pull you into tarot in a deeper way that adds a layer of meaning to your tarot. Certain things like, what if someone doesn't believe what I'm telling them? Can I read for someone who isn't present? It's all very surface level, and I will say, while I liked the concept of this book so far of what I've read, I don't feel that I feel like it's very geared toward the masses. Like, it's trying to be very general. I feel like this author speaks a lot about herself and her practice and her experiences, which, is kind of the point when you write a book like this. But I didn't feel like it was broad enough maybe that's not the right way of saying this. I feel like it was too broad. It was too broad, and her own experiences sort of leaned for me in a way that didn't make it feel as useful for my practice personally. I feel like there were a lot of sort of sarcastic quips in here, which can be fun. And I know a lot of people, I guess I would compare it to maybe, like, what is that book? Is it the Kitchen Sink Tarot, or there's a book. I don't remember the title. I'll put it on the screen. But I just, when I read that, it was kind of the same vibe. It was very like trying to be cheeky and kitschy. And when I'm studying tarot, like, I kind of want to be pulled into it. I don't necessarily want antidotes for tarot, which I feel like this sort of is. I didn't feel that it went in depth as much on, how do I even word this? I'm not sure what I'm thinking of this book. I'm not sure what I wanted, but this isn't it. This wasn't it for me. It's almost like there's too much information, like, that just touches on points. And so I feel a little overwhelmed by all the things versus really like sinking my teeth into one specific thing. Maybe that's what the issue is for me. Because like we have the shape, snapshot, musings, core principles added up. If you squint at the Enneagon nine-sided figure, you might think it's a circle. That's how close we are to finishing up this first cycle. And we stop and chill with the hermit. And that language really pulls me out of the study aspect of this book. And so for most of so far of what I've read, I'm constantly being kind of tugged out of it in a way that makes me feel like I'm talking to, I don't know, it makes me feel like I'm talking to the lady at the metaphysical store who's trying to sell me something versus someone who's trying to teach me something. I hope that makes sense. So this one says, we've arrived at our first double-digit number. If we combine its base numbers, 1 of 0, we find the magician. The magician reminds us of what we've learned and experienced in this past cycle. With the essence of 0 and the Fool, we are not only beginning again in a new way, but we should hold on to that sense of wonder to seek joy in the world and foster happiness. As you look at the possible equations, consider what factors and qualities from the prior cards got you to this point. You're now familiar with each of these cards, so I encourage you to contemplate what each pairing means to you. I don't know, you guys. It's like, it's too PC. I don't know how to explain it. I guess this is just, it's not my learning style. And so I struggled to sort of absorb the information in a way that was helpful for me. Justice is a formidable card that is upfront about what it's about. Justice seeks balance, truth, delivering fair and just results, seeing the consequences and or rewards of one's actions. I can get all this in a basic like tarot how-to. I didn't want all of that. I just wanted the math part. And maybe because I'm really bad at math, maybe I'm just not getting it, which is highly likely now that I'm saying that out loud. 1 + 1 = 2, High Priestess, to overcome fears and find balance. Like, maybe the concept is too big for my brain. I don't know. I wasn't able to grasp the information the way I wanted to, the way I was hoping I could. And if you're good with numbers and you enjoy those concepts, I think this book would be really good for you. But my brain there's nothing in here that has enough tooth to it for me to grasp personally. And that's not to say that that's not there. It's just that my brain, the way my brain works, I couldn't grab onto it. So for me, this is not a hit, it's a miss, unfortunately. But I do think if you love numbers and you like that sort of mathematical edge of things, I think you could really get into this book and get a lot of good information out of it. So that is that. Now last, I have Llewellyn's Little Book of Sun Spells. This is one that was sort of thrown in for me. It was a surprise when I opened the box. This is not one, I think when I very first started my practice, my witchcraft / tarot practice, I would have really liked this book. And I think it would be fantastic for any beginner. But now that I'm, a handful of years in, coming back to tarot and witchcraft back in 2021, I'm 4 years in now, almost 5 years. And this is it's too basic, too beginner. It's fun to have. And I love the concept of the sun because I feel like there's so much out there on the moon. There's just not that much on the sun. And as a summer person, I love summer. I love all things summer. I love the sun. I like to sit in the sun. I really had high hopes for this when I saw it in the box, but the reality of it is it's very beginner friendly, and that's just not where I'm at in my practice. But it talks about solar magic basics, timing, positions, seasonal solar rituals, solar correspondences, solar magic, solar activities for every month. And then we talk about crafts and potions, powders, rituals, spells and charms. There's a lot in this book. And then it really gets into, gives you the information on like what to say for your ritual, the ingredients or supplies or tools that you need for each one. Like I said, it's very beginner friendly. It's not really for me. This feels a little too specific, very hyper specific. But again, I think if you are looking for something to sort of learn from, I think this would be a great resource, to learn from and experience the way to do, spells or rituals, times of year to do them, and then be able to craft your own practice around that. I think it's a great tool for that. Sunfire spell for fertility, grow your dreams. There is one in here about creating a sun altar, which I thought was fun. Grow the garden spell. I feel like I was close to the altar one. I was flipping through this earlier, but maybe not. So, you know, and then it has little snippets of like historical type things. Sundials are the earliest timekeeping devices. So it is fun. It's informative. I think it's well laid out. I think it's very friendly to someone who wants to dig into more sun work and spells and rituals. This is not an early copy. This is an actual, you know, this is what you'll get. And if you're interested in this book, let me know and I can get it sent to you if that's something you want to dive into. So all in all, I want to thank Llewellyn for sending me these books. I think they're fun to be able to flip through an experience and review here for you guys so that you can see what they're all about. And with that, that is all I have for this video. If you guys have questions or comments, be sure to leave them below, like and subscribe, all the good things. And I will catch up with you in the next video.